Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of Talk Architecture Podcast. I'm your host, Naziati Muhammad Yaqub, and today's episode is part of the Season 12 itinerary, aim, and agenda on architecture education and architecture practice. And in particular, we have discerned from our last conversation that we had with architect Wee Lo Kwang on the issue of the design thesis and how it is an important year as part of the whole journey of a student of architecture at the very beginning. So we would like to focus on this in this episode in particular. In the next episode, we will hear of opinions from Gary O, who has recently graduated from the master's degree. So we have different opinions from different levels of where people come from different levels, as fresh graduate, 5 years into architecture, 10 years, mid-level, senior, people from academia, people from architecture practice, people who are award-winning architects such as Architect Wee. So, therefore, what we're gonna find out are consensual opinions or similar opinions. We, of course, would hear of the differing opinions. And then I'd like to summarize the consensual thoughts, such as the design thesis. And in particular, I will call him Lo Wee. In particular, Lo Wee said the importance of how a fifth-year student choose their own topic, seek the supervisor or the tutor who comes from the industry. So the industrial or the industry background is an important factor, because one would argue so as well, because after fifth year, you are going into the industry. The next year will be your fresh graduate going into the industry. So it's imperative that by the end of fifth year, you gain more confidence and be much more relaxed to go into the industry. Whether or not your topic is very academic, or whether your topic is not a commercial or something that is industry related in terms of the obvious building types, it could be an interesting topic that you would like to touch upon. Could be to do with women in architecture or juvenile detention center, something that you would not normally do when you go into the industry, obviously. But it's something that you want to do very much. And getting someone from the industry is an important factor. So, look, we also mentioned, which I agree, that there is no paradigm shift in terms of architecture education courses in schools of architecture in Malaysia that shows that we actually understand what architecture education is. So this is what I myself have been struggling as well. If I were to teach a design thesis unit, I'd want somebody who is from the industry to be leading with me, at least I'm not going to be the one giving the instructions so much in terms of how the studio will be run, but I will facilitate that process where the design thesis is, have in its processes with the student all the learning that is needed to be learned and all the confidence that need to be gained with the teamwork or collaboration with the industry, external critiques. So that's what I was doing a lot. And I know that was important. But of course, people don't know that. So that's why the need to have a validation from the industry players such as Lowe, who said it frankly, apart from Kevin McLeod, obviously, and we could ask others, obviously, from the industry who would probably agree. I've seen those from the industry being in design thesis courses in other universities, even leading the unit. So I see a lot of encouragement from the students, reactions of how they are learning, and they were happy about this. Whether or not the schools, full-time academicians like it or not is something else. We have seen that in the AA school how the late Alvin Boyarsky managed to juggle different personalities, and some are not architects even, to be leaders in leading the diploma units, for example, similar to the master's studio. So we have seen that, and how the students decided to follow a certain unit, and there's a lot of reading, a lot of trying to understand the subject, there is a method that was, it's not only about the subject, it's also about the method, which is even another step further than just what we do in schools of architecture in Malaysia. So that is one thing. Another thing is who is leading is another thing as well. So the academicians don't have to lead the design thesis 5-year courses. All they need to do is facilitate the teamwork, the deliverables, shall we say. So the deliverables, even Kevin McLeod, when he was in the design thesis unit with me, he would tell the students, we need to have these drawings. But the learning is different. So we look into the design problems. We look into master planning if necessary. We look into very detail. We look into different interdisciplinary, even engineering, medicine, and so on, to get into the design problems. So that was something that I was into as well. So a lot of complementary way of seeing the problem with the students, which helped a lot, and the collaborative processes. Let us get back to the point at hand regarding this episode. Design thesis is as a pivotal year and instrumental lifelong learning, especially the first part of a student's architectural journey. So we ask the question, how long does it take to be an architect that you need to be? There were suggestions that you'd really come into maturity as an architect after many years of practice at the age of 40. So let's, for the sake of argument, consider 35 as the age when you start being a mid-level architect. So just say 35, and then 5 years later, you can go out on your own, right? So this is the perception at the age of 23. 25 would be when you finish your master's. Then 10 years later, you have enough experience to be in mid-level architect, as a mid-level architect, and go to senior level architect. or you can strike out on your own. So after 40, you could be owning your own company or be a director, and right until whatever age that you wish to practice. Later, you may dabble in other things apart from architecture. So let's say that maybe 4% of those who started out in a batch, just say theoretically, 4%, will be the real leaders and critical thinkers. Not only they are directors, CEOs, or striking out on their own, they are also the real leaders and critical thinkers in society. And they could be it could be beyond architecture, yeah, urban design, or it could be just society, social, environmental issues. So the real leaders and critical thinkers are those who, are their own person. So what about the 96% of the rest of them? So if 10% will be the general CEOs and directors of architectural companies, may they be commercial companies, then that will leave us to 86%. So out of this 86% of those graduated from a general batch, yeah, say 50% will earlier on opt out of architecture to do other totally different career path or related design career paths. There could be graphic designers or product designers, and other design career paths, interior design and so on. Or they do other things like film direction, arts and crafts, totally other commercial things, even own cafes and restaurants. So we say 50% opt out of architecture. So what happens to the 36%? So what I'm interested in, besides the leaders and the directors of companies and those who decided not to do architecture, is the one that decided to still be in architecture. That 36%, or maybe 36 to 50% of the original batch, okay, of students that graduated from the schools of architecture. So how is this absorbed in the workforce of architecture, planning, and construction? They'll be at different levels, but if you're in a traditional path, just say after 10 years, like I said, from 25 to 35, after 10 years at mid-level architect, you'd want to be somewhere else after that, because you're in the architectural industry, which may be related to the construction industry. Just say you decided to be a project manager, that relates more to project management and quantitative surveying and contractors, obviously. So that's a different sort of career path in a way that you could be taking. Or you could be thinking, okay, there's not much money in architecture practice, so I'm going to go and work with a developer. This is quite common. I've seen a lot of my former students at the age of 35 decided to work with developers. Yeah. So they would still be doing design, but they would be looking at design from the client's point of view. They're not, in true respect, the traditional architect, right? So this 36%, this number is just notional for them at the moment for our discussion here. So the bigger aims of making a career out of architecture for the individual so we're talking about the individual, the career of the individual, and we're talking about the board of architects' interest in the career of the individual and how it affects the industry. Because this architect who went in the traditional way is a highly specialized professional. No one else can do their job, right? And it is a job the architect's job is not an easy job, and they call it jack of all trades, master of none. So you know, this is in the part 3 examination criteria as well, or the professional registered architect exams in different countries. The idea that the architect who passed this exam has went through all the different processes, from conceptual, schematic, tender documentation to contract implementation and completion. So meaning that a sizable size of a building was being dealt with by this architect in a different manner, and particularly in contractual aspects, and learning about the regulations that is connected or needed to be known when you deal with the local authorities and so on, because that's contractual part is what people want registered architects to be responsible for, to be responsible on behalf of the client, and responsible on behalf of the authorities as well. The architect has to be mindful of all that is required to be done, so that the project is not a project that is contravening with the laws and regulations of the country. So these 36% deals with that aspect of the main development of architecture in a country. And in many countries, they have similar laws, obviously. Malaysia has similar laws to the United Kingdom. But as time goes by, we develop different laws, of course. But the basic framework is there. And that's why I could safely say that in architecture, the building construction processes start with similar things in anywhere else in this world as well. And you know, when you say about the UK, there's all the Commonwealth countries as well that adopted and adapted to their context the United Kingdom's framework. So going back to the design thesis as a pivotal year, an instrumental lifelong learning experience, for a year you could have somebody from the industry assist the student in the design thesis, where, as I said, design thesis as a pivotal moment. After 4 years, then you have the 5th year before you go to the industry, and there's a chance for you as a design thesis student to do a year-long study and investigate the topic of your choosing, and you could be given a chance to work someone with industry. So that gave you more confidence about moving forward. And I've mentioned about the AA model earlier. So if you think about it, you will have a connection where you can build a learning relationship with a mentor, where you investigate a phenomenon. So how does the School of Architecture do that thing where the School of Architecture has this practitioner role in it, and in the design thesis here, and how to make this role much more prominent than the role of the academic? Okay, the academic, who is in charge of that year, the design thesis year, sets the theme and the direction, and, for example, the requirements that the school want the student to do. So the external critique or the supervisor from the industry has their style and their way to assist the student, and at least the student can have a different experience a different way of approach, because it's highly specialized. And that method or methodology that the person employ is accepted in the whole system as well. So can that be done in Malaysia? Because that hasn't been done yet. And that's when, look, we mentioned about the paradigm shift. This is the thing that I and him had agreed. So when we mentioned as well that the supervisor and external critique, somebody could be interested in similar things that what he does, like timber architecture. And so the design thesis, the decision, will look into the design problem of timber architecture and find a suitable typology of the issue and work with that tutor. So the way the design thesis program is designed to accommodate to the endeavor of achieving the design problems relating to the typology and design problems relating to timber architecture, following the set of guidelines to fulfill the school's requirement. That is not happening yet in Malaysian schools of architecture. So that's why doesn't the School of Architecture in Malaysia accept this way or this approach? Because it really helps with the decision making that students make, and decision making make them gain confidence. And you'd want somebody to get to a level of intellectual and conceptual confidence or skills. So the school just needs someone to facilitate that. So here we see that is a conundrum, and being inside before, being an academic before, I wanted to show by having my unit run by a practitioner and me collaborating with the running and the direction and the philosophy of that unit. I wanted to show an example that the School of Architecture can adopt, but the School of Architecture did not want to. They decided to focus on the academic, the different academic heading the unit, and the practitioner just assisting, like external critique. So there is not much intellectual rigor in that. There's not much in terms of challenges to. These challenges are important for students of architecture to face on and try to complete these challenges, so that however difficult it is, they would gain from it, and much more in terms of skills and competence and confidence to face working life. So the design thesis, as you know, there's a lot of episodes that I have touched upon in this podcast, going back to April 2020 when I started the podcast on design thesis, on architecture curriculum, and design thesis was raised again and again throughout the year and into the 2021s. So we come here at 2023 with post interview with architect Lo Wee, and we're gonna look forward to another episode on architecture education and industry with someone who just graduated and who mentioned to me that he is not doing the traditional architecture work, but he's being the office manager of an architecture company, no doubt, but learning about architecture in that way. So there's no straight and narrow path is the right path. So the right path could have a lot of mistakes and falling down and doing something that's experimental. But the right path is the path of discovery, the true path that you want to discover your sense of self and sense of who this identity as an architect. If you embrace the identity of the architect, what is an architect to you, then it's easier because you love that part of yourself, of being that architect, and that sense of purpose that you need to go forward. So this is the podcast episode that deals with this issue of how instrumental design thesis is in the light of the architecture education of a particular student's journey. So do not take for granted of this year. Do not take for granted of how much importance this year is in terms of gaining confidence and setting you up for the industry and getting to be that architect that you need to be at the age of 35, 10 years down the road, of 40 when you set out on your own. So there will be other challenges in practice, but at least this concludes, the design thesis will conclude that 5 years and how you tackle the next few years into professional practice by being a registered architect. So we're looking at the 36%, or maybe debatable, the 36 to 50% of those graduating will be doing the traditional architecture. I'm still thinking 30% is still, 36% is still a big population or a big number or percentage of people still following the traditional architectural path. But there is no longitudinal study. There is no, I can't find any for the Malaysian architects. So it will be interesting if there was such a study made and asking the real questions needed to be asked. So thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I hope you got something from this, and do catch the next episode where we interview Gary Yo. Thank you.